Support for Consider This is provided by the University of Nebraska at Omaha College of Communication, Fine Arts, and Media.
From the campus of the University of Nebraska at Omaha, Consider This, a program of issues and information behind today's news.
The speed with which information spreads now has created the ideal conditions for a phenomenon known as circular reporting. This is when publication A publishes misinformation, publication B reprints it, and publication A then cites B as the source for the information. It's also considered a form of circular reporting when multiple publications report on the same initial piece of false information, which then appears to another author as having been verified by multiple sources.
Hi everyone, I'm Kathy Wyatt. Welcome to this week's edition of Consider This. Our topic, fake news. Here to talk more about it are Chris Allen. Professor Allen is with UNO's School of Communication, and Henry Cordes. Henry is a Metro news reporter for the Omaha World Herald. Thank you both so much for being here and welcome.
Thank you.
All right, Chris, we're gonna start with you. How do you define fake news?
Yeah, and it's important to start with a definition. My idea of fake news is something that is completely devoid of facts, or facts that are not facts, information that is made up with the intent to deceive. All right? That absolves things like the old Colbert Report or the Onion, although both of those often used real information, just skewed it in a way, which is another way of presenting fake news, but they did it as satire. They did it to entertain, and it was obvious that they were not being serious. Fake news are certain websites, certain information outlets that may take portions of information that is verifiable, create it with other information that is a piece of fiction, and present it as actual news with the intent to sway an opinion.
We've been hearing a lot about this lately. However, there's a history here. Talk to us a little bit about the history of fake news.
Well, as long as there's been information, there's been opportunities to distort information, and we've dealt with it from prior to the media. You know, the media, the printing press was invented in the West in 1450, and almost immediately there was fake news, fake information to achieve usually an unpleasant means. And we can go all the way back to 1475, and we can talk about the Trent trial, all the way back in 1475, which happened in Easter. A 2.5-year-old boy named Semino went missing in Trent, Italy, and in response, a Franciscan preacher whose name was Bernardino de Felta gave several speeches claiming that Jews had actually murdered the child to celebrate Passover. The Bishop of Trent ordered the arrest and torture of the entire Jewish population of Trent, and they eventually found 15 Jews guilty of the boy's murder, and all of them were burned at the stake.
Wow. All right, we have another example too.
We can. One of my favorite happened in 1835. The Sun newspaper was our very first penny press in 1833, and as a circulation building stunt, they published stories that said that scientists, using their new powerful telescopes, had discovered life on the moon. And we knew this to be true because they had drawings of it. They published drawings, so it had to be true. The actual drawing that you see there. It gave such a boost, and they ran like 6 articles about this, and it gave such a circulation boost that the Sun remained a powerful newspaper for 100 years after that. It just boosted circulation and profits and all kinds of things. There was one in 1917, just prior, well, actually during World War I, about the time America got into it. There were a lot of fake news stories during the war, and a lot of them used as propaganda efforts. But one of the most ludicrous happened in the spring. The Times and the Daily Mail, both of them in London, published stories from an anonymous source that claimed they had visited a cadaver factory in Germany. The articles reported that the Germans were boiling human corpses to extract glycerin, which is a compound in making soap, margarine, nitroglycerin. And after the war, the former British chief of Army intelligence stated that he had invented the story strictly for propaganda purposes. So again, there was a goal to this. It wasn't satire. It wasn't funny. It was to achieve a goal. And then Hitler himself, many propaganda efforts. One of them was early in his service as chancellor in 1933. Just a month after he was sworn in, an arson fire engulfed the Reichstag. The Nazi Party were really prepared for this, which gives us, an idea that this was, perhaps an intentional arson. The Nazi Party used radio to spread fake news across the country and build support for their concocted story that the communists were actually behind it. And Hitler got laws passed that gave the Reichstag and the government carte blanche mostly to investigate and persecute communists.
Is there a common thread? You've talked a little bit about who was behind what here, but what kind of people are putting stuff out there knowing that it's not true? What kind of a reaction? I mean, is there a certain profile for these folks, Chris, or?
No, I don't know that there's anything in common with any of these people. I mean, we can talk about the one during the Civil War.
Yeah.
They were two newspaper publishers published a fake, absolutely made-up report that Abraham Lincoln was about to draft another X number of soldiers because the war was going so badly. Mm-hmm. The stock market dropped, which was their intent. They went in, they bought a whole bunch of stock. It proved to be fake. Prices went back up. They made a killing, except they went to jail. They were caught and they went to jail. Greed, persecution of others, fear of Jews, fear. It's all of those things. I don't know that there is a profile that fits people who do fake news. Power, riches, maybe. It's perhaps that ego.
Well, then you complicate things a little bit more. Enter social media.
Yes.
So, seems a little obvious in terms of, just kind of exploding on the scene there. But what has social media done to this?
Well, social media has made possible the spread even faster and wider. Mm-hmm. All of these examples were fairly restricted. Trent didn't go outside the city of Trent, the trial of Trent. The Reichstag fire certainly engulfed all of Germany, but Germany at the time was not that large of a country. As long as you're talking about newspapers and radio and television, the coverage area remains fairly small, and there is an opportunity to douse the fire, as it were. On the internet, it can run wild, and it can spread instantly. I mean, within a day, this stuff can go all over the country into all kinds of audiences and change all kinds of minds. Even people who are predisposed not to believe it, if there's enough out there, there's a change.
Thinking, yeah, possibly a little differently. Is there any one social media channel that you think is doing more damage than another, just in terms of?
I don't know if there's just one. I mean, I can think of InfoWars. I can think of Breitbart. They are more sites rather than social media channels, although they do tweet out and Instagram out and post on Facebook their content. Mm-hmm. So they use social media to spread their content, but they are actual sites that play very loose with the facts at best and outright lie at worst. And there have been examples of both.
Wow. And for the viewers who are watching, is there anything current, Chris, that comes to mind in terms of a good example of a fake news story here, just recently?
The most recent, the one that most people I think would be most familiar with, and it's really a couple of years old, is the Pizzagate scandal, where it was alleged that there was a pizza parlor in New York City where there was child pornography, child sexual abuse going on in the basement, that Hillary Clinton and Bill Clinton were behind this. It was spread by InfoWars. And it actually resulted in a man going to the actual pizza. There really was a pizza parlor with this, that it was alleged where this was going on. And he walked in with a shotgun and began shooting the place up and killed several people.
And that does bring to mind, as you're talking about this, I mean, it's hard enough, I think, for some people to separate the two. But then you have this fake news that might have some elements of fact to it. I mean, do you know, is that, or is it usually just one or the other?
Well, no, because you can always distort facts.
Okay.
You can always distort facts. And even more reason, it's not tied to one incident, but when the staff of the Annapolis newspaper were killed last year, it was just a man walking in off the street because he was tired of newspapers publishing fake news. He had no evidence that the Annapolis paper was actually publishing fake news, but he heard this as a trend among all media, and he was going to take care of it. And people died as the result of that.
Henry, I can't even imagine. What are you thinking? First of all, maybe we should go into, for our viewers who don't know who you are, a little bit about who is Henry Cordes, right? What's important to know?
Well, I guess on this panel, I'm someone who deals in real news, and isn't it unfortunate I even have to use a term like that? I mean, I've been a long-time reporter at the World Herald and for more than 30 years, and I'm actually a graduate here in UNO, where I went to journalism school. I should have been paying more attention, Chris, because I didn't remember all those examples from history that you talked about. But I do a lot of public policy reporting, so I'm dealing a lot in fact and analysis of facts, and so I think I can speak to a little bit about how we do things in the news business. I mean, the example that I saw earlier in the video there of circular news, that's not something that I see, at least not on around here, and it's certainly not something that I would engage in, and it's certainly not what they teach you in J school either. I mean, we generally, if I'm putting something in the paper, it's because I know it to be true. But I can speak to kind of how we do things in the news business and how important it is for us to be accurate. And I can also talk a little bit maybe about how fake news, what the impact it is having on our business.
And I think that's a good place to start. Chris has done a great job of kind of setting the stage for us, and you there as a bona fide reporter working really hard to make sure that the facts are getting out there, and you're hearing this. What does that do, not just to you, Henry, but to the industry as a whole?
Well, I think the most dangerous thing about fake news is to the degree that it does undercut the credible news organizations and the news that we do, or the work that we do, I should say. I mean, if that trust is important, that the trust the public has and that they can believe what they're reading is really critical. And it's not just critical, I mean, to the news business, it's critical to our democracy. When you consider the role that the news media plays in holding institutions and the government accountable and making sure that we have a fair and open discourse, on issues of important policy. I mean, the news media historically has been trusted to be an arbiter in that debate, and so anything that harms that trust is very, very bad for just the way our whole system functions. And I guess the other way that you see fake news impacting the media now is now anytime someone sees a story they don't agree with, they don't like, it doesn't fit their personal politics, or it's very easy for them to dismiss it as, oh, that's fake news. And we see a lot of that in the political realm right now, and again that's very damaging to our system because it undercuts the trust that people have in legitimate news organizations. Why
did you get into this, Henry?
I got into it because, I just love it, for one. I mean, from the first day I walked into a newsroom, I just fell in love with the place, and I loved the process of discovery And I do it because I really care. I mean, we really care about what we do. We care about our communities, and we really care to make sure that what we're reporting is accurate, and because disinformation doesn't serve anybody.
What I think is really interesting is, for those of us on the receiving end of what you do, we read the story, right? I'm not saying we take it for granted, but we don't even begin to understand what kind of work goes into a single story. So I think maybe if you could think of something a little more recent, Henry, that you've worked on, and just maybe give the viewers an idea of start to finish what it takes to get a story into, for this, for this purpose of this program, the Omaha World Herald, for example.
Well, I'm just finishing up a long-time series we've been doing on pensions and on the Omaha Public Schools Pension Fund, and that story started as I just saw something in the paper that didn't make sense to me. I mean, the Omaha Public Schools was having to cut its budget significantly because of its underfunded pension system, and there was just a single paragraph or sentence in that story that basically blamed it on the reason the pension system was in such trouble was because of the Great Recession, and this kind of just shows you how these kind of things come about. It just didn't make any sense to me, because anybody who has a 401k knows that the markets took a big tumble in 2008, and then they came right back up, and so it just didn't. So I wanted to find out, what caused this problem that's having a very serious impact on the budget of the school district that educates more poor kids than any school district in the state. And so I looked into it, and what we found was there were some mistakes made, and there were some questionable relationships with their advisor, and the pension fund ended up putting a lot of their money into investments that their advisor had financial ties to. There was a lack of process in how they chose new investments, and I mean, this served the public to know just what caused this serious problem, and I spent weeks working on this, and it involved. I mean, I ended up with a pile of documents. I'm going through finance reports. I'm going through. Interviewed dozens of people. I mean, there's a lot of work and a lot of care that goes into something like that, and a series like that is going to have thousands and thousands of facts in them, and we sweat every one of them. I mean, I was just fact checking a story today, and it was going back to my original source on all of these things to make sure that, that to the best that I can, that every word that I'm putting in the story is accurate.
Now, one of the things, and thank you for sharing that you said was, we look into it. And that seems so simple on the surface, right? But when you're talking about that, you are talking about picking up a phone and making sure that you're not only getting people, but the right people, Henry. I mean, this isn't just to be taken lightly. You're really trying to get to sources that are going to tell you, right? Exactly what you need to know.
Oh yeah, no, and this story, and we always have to find the right people and people to know, but in this case, documents are the gold standard of reporting, and a lot of this was relying on documents, going through meeting minutes and going through financial documents, because documents are, although in this age, unfortunately, in the digital age, even documents can be altered now, and I've run into that, unfortunately, in my reporting in the past. But documents are the gold standard of reporting, just because they are viewed as unalterable, and they are part of the record.
I want to ask, with the introduction of social media, it seems like back in my day, we had to cite sources a lot more than it seems that we may be doing that today. Is it just, are we still having to do that as much as you think we used to, or are we getting away from that, which leads me into this whole fact versus opinion kind of thing, right? So, Henry, you want to address that?
Yeah, and I when I think back on my days as a young cub reporter, and I tended to attribute everything, and because that's what you were just taught, but at some point you you reach a confidence in your ability to tell a story and to tell it accurately, and then you do tend to do less attribution, and because the thought is, and this gets very much to the credibility of news organizations, we can believe this because the Omaha World Herald says that it's true, and that's why our credibility is everything to us, and that's also why we bend over backwards to be accurate, and because it is that important, and also I'll say, we do make mistakes, and we do. It's inevitable. Everybody makes mistakes. The only problem is, I always like to say, when we make mistakes, they get reprinted 100,000 times and distributed all over eastern Nebraska. And but when we do make mistakes, we own up to them and we correct them, and that's also part of our credibility as well.
I think it's easy sometimes for people to get caught up in the drama. For some reason, I have this visual of the grocery store checkout, and you've got all the magazines, right? And you're reading the headlines. And your eye tends to be drawn to the one that just really takes you aback the most. So my question to you two gentlemen at this point, in just the minutes we have remaining, is I'm a consumer, right? Is there anything obvious that you can do to be able to say, that's fake and that's real? What are some of the guidelines that we follow to know, okay, no, I'm not going to fall for that, right? Is there any one or two or three things that we can be watching for that would tell us?
Well, I think the most obvious thing is, does the news story have a name attached to it? In other words, are the sources nameable? Now, we're relying a lot on anonymous sources these days because government officials are afraid to, getting in trouble and things like that. But is there a specific title or a specific name that's involved in the story that is the source or the sources for the story? There are fact-checking sites that you can go to. There are a number. There's Snopes is my favorite, my one to go to. There's PolitiFact. There are a number of sources that we can go to double check, and the reliable ones are nonpartisan. They are just fact-checking organizations. How does the reporter put the story together? Is it believable? Are there names? Is there sensational language in it? If there's not, it's more likely to be a little more credible. If it's shocking news or something like that, there's probably a lot of fiction in a story like that.
I think in the spirit of being right here on UNO's campus, and Chris, you've been doing this for a long time, the students who are coming in now, obviously different, and rightfully so, from the students who were coming in back in the day. They've been exposed to social media. They've had different experiences than maybe the J students back in my day. How do you look at teaching today? How are you able to kind of adjust and have that morph and evolve with the students of today?
I don't. I teach them how to write a lead. I teach them how to cover a story, how to ferret out facts, how to interview people. I teach them that they have to be as accurate and as balanced as they can in their reporting. And it has not changed since I went to J school in 1974. It is the same. The tools are a little bit different. The distribution system is different. But good journalism has not changed, and it should not. It should always be balanced. It should be as accurate as it can possibly be, and it should rely on sources that you can trace back to the very beginning.
Do you find that it's accepted differently because of all the exposures that the students of today have had with the social media, that maybe you have to approach it a little bit differently, even though the foundational pieces are the same?
I guess the only change is that I have to acknowledge that there are news sites that aren't entirely reliable, and I have to acknowledge those. I have to acknowledge that when they get out in the business, they may find themselves under other pressures to do things a certain way, to report a certain way, and that they must be resistant to that or live with the consequences.
Okay.
And the consequences are really dire. I mean, when Henry was talking about the credibility and undermining the whole news process, the only way we can hear what our politicians say, other than going to rallies, and we can't all go to all the rallies, is the news media. And when you begin undermining that, you really begin to destroy the whole electoral process, because we rely so much on that. And the most recent example is the New Yorker article about Fox News and the Democratic Party's decision to drop Fox News from any of its debates. Now, you can say what you want to about Fox News, but it is a media outlet. Mm-hmm. And when we drop a major media outlet from the political process, this is really damaging to what we do.
Wow, fascinating discussion. I want to thank you both. I want to put up some websites, and I know you referred to one of them here earlier in the program, but Newslit, these are great sites for you to check out. Today's topic, fake news, of course. Newslit.org, Snopes.com, PolitiFact.com. Thank you. Factcheck.org and OpenSecrets.org. Gentlemen, thank you for being here today, sharing your time, your knowledge, your stories, and I wish you well moving forward. Yeah.
Thank you.
Thanks to our students, of course, who are working so hard behind the scenes, our viewers for watching. As we close, a look at a UNO hockey practice as seen through the lens of Philip Lemon, a senior right here at UNO. We'll see you next week.
Consider This is an issues and information program produced by UNO Television. More information and program archives can be found at netnebraska.org/Consider This. If you'd like to share your comments about this program, call UNO Television at 402-554-2516 during regular business hours, or send an email to cwyatt@unomaha.edu.
Support for Consider This is provided by the University of Nebraska at Omaha College of Communication, Fine Arts, and Media.